everybody, it's Jess here with Bless Jess. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry, yet again, I'm doing this Bible study in the car. My life has become so busy and so hectic that honestly, it is the best place. Okay, I'm trying to make sure this is always zoomed out. There we go. This has become the best place to do it. And I'm actually in David's car today, if it looks a little bit different. So if you are new, we are going through the book Without Rival by Lisa Bevere. I've really been enjoying this book. Right now we are in chapter 5. We're cruising along through here. We're not quite halfway, but we are getting there. And hopefully I can hold this and do this video. Anyway, I need an extra hand. We are in the middle of chapter 5 right now. I've already done 2 parts. David actually joined me last week and we did a really great part for chapter 2, or part 2. Oh, yeah, part 2. And today we're going to do part 3. And I don't know if we'll even finish this chapter today, but we are going to do the best we can. If not, we'll finish it next week. I really don't want to hurry it along. I want to give it its due time because we are talking about, if you're new, go check out the playlist. I'll have a link down below. You can buy the book, or you can watch it, listen to it on Scribed. And I have 2 free months down below if you want to get that. But we're talking about rivals. And earlier on in the book, we've talked about how you are not in comparison with anyone. You are without rival. But that does not mean that you're not going to have rivals rise up in your life. It happens. It totally happens. And what those rivals can teach you is very, very, very important. And last week we ended talking about David and Goliath and a little bit about David and Saul. And that is where we're starting back today. So David was going to be the new king, but he was anointed when he was a little boy. And so obviously he wasn't ready to be king yet. And the king was Saul. And at first, David and Saul were very close, almost like a father-son relationship. David would play the harp for the king. And then, of course, when he defeated Goliath, he was a hero. And so he became, you know, really good friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. And it was almost like David was an honorary member of the family at first. So, it did not end the way it began. Very soon, Saul started realizing how much attention and love David was getting, and he became very jealous. And he became an enemy of David and was even trying to kill him at one point. So, and this is the most painful type of rival, a rival that you were close to at one point, maybe a family member, a close friend. I've experienced friends that I thought were my friends, and then, you know, they kind of turned on me, and it's very, very hard. It's so much more painful than just someone that you're not close to, you know, that's a rival in your life. So Saul became offended when he saw that people were comparing him and David. And, you know, they were just praising David and said, you know, that he could do so much more, basically. And the women were singing, Saul kills by 1,000, but David by the 10,000. So that comparison became very, very strong. And it offended Saul. It really offended him. So, she says in here, when you are dealing with insecurity, an unfavorable comparison can change a friend into a rival in the blink of an eye. Saul no longer saw David as an asset that he had proven himself to be. He saw David as a threat, and everything shifted overnight. He saw David as a threat, and that's where the rivalry started. And honestly, it all began because he started comparing himself. And I've talked to you guys lots of times about how dangerous comparison is. Comparison is so dangerous. It is a slippery slope. You start comparing yourself, and then it just leads to all kinds of bad things. Oh man, I have a lot to say about comparison and rivals and what they can teach you. And the best thing to even ever stop from even going down the road of rivals is just don't compare. Do not compare your situation to someone else's situation. Okay, so God can use whatever he wants to achieve his purpose. In this case, it meant sending an agent of torment to push an envious king over the edge. So on this day, David was just doing what he had always done, playing his harp, and Saul had something different in his hand because of something had shifted inside his heart. So David didn't even know what was going on. He was just playing his harp. He thought everything was cool, and Saul had all these hurtful, hard feelings in his heart. Okay, let me adjust my hand here. Saul had a spear in his hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall, but David evaded him twice. So David is playing the harp. She said, imagine the contrast here. David's not a threat to him. He's over there playing the harp. I don't know a more peaceful position someone could be in. And Saul is running through the house with a spear, trying to hurl it at him. She says, can the contrast be any more vast? Who runs around their house with a spear? He had gone over the edge. You know, he wasn't even thinking straight at this point. Not a good place for David to be. So David was now forced to take evasive action to avoid the very same man who yesterday rode by his side and had his back in battle. David's best brought out Saul's worst, and the nagging foreboding progressed to a fully formed spirit of fear. It says in the Bible that Saul feared David. It was clear that God was with David and he had left Saul. Everything David had done, you know, turned out well. So Saul's like, well, God must be really with David. But as Saul saw David becoming more successful, he himself grew more fearful. David's military successes should have been celebrated as King Saul's victory. They're on the same team. If David wins in the military, Saul is king. That is his victory too. But rather than seeing these exploits as David securing the kingdom under the leadership of Saul, Saul imagined each battle stripped his authority away. He no longer saw David as his son, or did he comfort him? I mean, Saul used to have David play as a comforting thing, and now he no longer saw him as a comfort. He wanted David out of his sight. So he kept putting him in dangerous positions of combat to try to have him killed. But once again, this only served to position David to flourish. David rose as Saul tried to bury him. David had God on his side, and no matter what Saul did, he was protected. As Saul say that 5 times fast. As Saul more and more realized that God was with David and how much his own daughter Michal loved him, his fear of David increased and settled into hate. It happened so fast. Comparison into a threat, into fear, into hate. In a very short span of time, Saul's perception of David had morphed from suspicion to fear to hate. Gone was the David who was considered a son, a military hero, and an ally. He was now branded as an outlaw. So, because, I mean, if you're an outlaw of the king, you have a real reason to fear for your life. David had to run and he had to hide. So David had to run and hide from the king. But in this season of running and hiding, it really allowed him to draw close to God. It says that David learned the lessons that would prepare him to be a king after God's own heart. He was running from cave to cave, hiding from King Saul. And it says over the course of years of anguish, which we're not really sure how long this period lasted. She says some people believe it lasted 8 years. That's a long time to be running for your life. Over the course of the years, Saul's rivalry with David helped David know whether he was in a palace or a cave. It was the development of godliness that mattered. David was facing his second Goliath. So David had really a lot of hard things he had to overcome. His own father didn't treat him like a son. If you remember, and David touched on this a little bit, my husband David, touched a little bit on this last week about how when Samuel came to anoint David, you know, his own father didn't even bring him into that. He just said, you know, he just figured out, you're not going to want this little kid. You're not going to want him. And he didn't even call for him. He didn't even acknowledge him. So David grew up in that kind of a life where he wasn't even valued. And now this other person that he looked to as a father is trying to kill him. It says each time David interacted with the king in the wilderness, so when Saul was trying to find him and catch him, he cried out and called Saul father. He saw him as a father, just like his own father betrayed him. And, he was the youngest of 7 older brothers, and he kind of was looked down on. Now we're dealing with this. He's dealing with this this man that he thought maybe was going to be his second father is now trying to kill him. In running, and this is really important, this next part, in running and hiding from Saul, David learned to run and hide in God. Many people want to be anointed, but they forget that the anointing comes with a purpose that is worked out in the presence of their enemies. Remember that rather than measuring yourself by where you are, remember what he has already brought you through. God uses these times of trials to bring you closer to him and to teach you things that you are not going to learn when everything's going well. If you have not seen the series I'm doing right now on the channel about all the health problems I went through as a teenager, I would encourage you to look at those. There's a whole story there, and I'm still working on the last few ones, but the trials I went through during that are not ones I would wish on my worst enemy. But if you ask me to go back and change them, I wouldn't, because it taught me so much, and I'm the person I am today because of those trials. It does not mean that God calls them. I do not believe he calls them, but I believe that he used them to teach me. As we listen in silence, we are poised for a transition. Will we believe what God said, or will we heed what our rival accusers are saying? The same God who began this good work in us will be faithful to complete it. Okay, so I know that this is really, really hard, and imagine yourself as David. He had the ultimate rival come up against him, but God used it. God knew as a king, he was going to have to be strong, and he was going to have to stay close to him. And it says in the Bible that David was a man after God's own heart. And in order to get him to that place, he had to go through some really hard trials and some really hard rivals. And in those moments of David running to God, it prepared him for his destiny. And it's this very same thing for you. She says, don't compare your current state with anyone. Guard your heart and every promise that has whispered into the recesses in your soul. Remove yourself from the static and develop your ability to become in tune with God's heart, with God's voice. This is on page 116. In this life, there is so much static. And that is true. Sometimes we just have to get away from the static. And, sometimes with me, I can kind of read into what people are saying, or really take offense to something somebody said, or read too much into it. And honestly, sometimes you just need to get away and just say, you know what, I'm just going to forgive them and I'm going to move on. Because the more and more you rehash it in your brain, you think about it over and over and over, the more you start to compare, the more you start to get mad, and the more you start to hate that other person. And then, you have a rival. Okay. When we concentrate on the word instead of our rivals, we enter into a life beyond their grasp. There is a vast difference between guarding your heart and an imprisoned heart. So many people choose to put a guard up on their heart because they don't want to be hurt anymore. And I definitely understand how that feels, but that is not what we're talking about. We're not saying don't let anyone get close to you so they can't hurt you. In life, you're going to have to let people in, and it is a risk. Some people are going to let you down, but and imprisoned, putting a guard on your heart is just living in fear. And that is not what we're called to do. She says, too many have chosen to harden their hearts in the hope this will keep their hearts protected until later when they feel it's safe to let them heal. Guarding your heart is protecting it rather than imprisoning it. If you have to put your heart on lockdown, make time for prayer. Or if you have put your heart on lockdown, make time for prayer. Ask God to release your heart from its stony prison and replace your heart with one that feels both joy and pain. Don't shut off your tears. Let them water your heart and keep it tender. And you guys know this, the more and more you guard your heart and you bottle up your emotions, the more and more one day you're just going to explode. I think letting it out little by little, crying, praying, releasing those hurt feelings, it will make a big difference, and it allows you to let people into your heart and not just shut it down. Okay, you guys, so let's finish up here. She says, a hardened, captive heart becomes deaf and bound bones can't respond. Those who judge others live constantly under the weight of their own sin. God is the alone judge. You are not to be the police of other people. You need to worry about yourself. And obviously, if you're getting hurt, you need to stop allowing that person to hurt you. But you can't just put your heart on a lockdown either. Hardened hearts do not stand in the presence of God. They isolate themselves or recline in the company of scorners who mock the pain of those who have chosen the tender path of healing. She says, when our hearts feel empty and barren, it's time to fill our mouths with song. When you're going through these trials, the best advice I can give you, and like I said, we've been through our share of trials, the best advice I can give you is just to praise. Put on worship music 24/7 if you have to. Go around and pray and say, God, you are good. You are faithful. Just remember all the good things he's done for you. Praise helps you look at God and not look at your circumstances. And it's really hard to do, but I have found that is the thing that eases my anxiety and fear more than anything, is just praise. Okay, let's move on here. I can't do this in my hands. Okay, we're finishing up. If you change your perspective on your rivals, God will redeem your pain. Don't forget, God is the one that's our defender. He sees everything, and he will defend you more than you could ever defend yourself. So keep your eye on him no matter what situation you're going through, no matter who's coming against you. You just do the right thing so that God is your defender. Remember, if you fight back, then you're not letting God defend you, and he's going to be removed from it. Let him fight your battles. I promise it will go much better. Open hearts will open doors and welcome others with open arms. God is love, and love is not shutting your heart off. I think that's a really important note. That is not what we're talking about. We are not talking about guard your heart so you can shut down your emotions. That never works. Many want to be a leader, but have a measure of influence is two-edged sword that cuts both ways. There will always be people who love you but don't know you. There will also be those who hate you but don't know you. But that's not a rival. That is just, if they don't know you, they just are forming their own opinion of you. Well, that is a rival, but that's not the one that hurts the most. In most cases, though, a rival is someone who once knew you well. And David describes a rival this way, and we're going to end it here. For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It's not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. We used to take sweet counsel together. Within God's house, we would walk in the throng. She says, we may have described their relationship as a frenemy. And it's true, because they were really close. And that is the ones that hurt the most. It is a rival, the rival that used to be a friend. And sometimes you have to learn who your true friends are. And but there's always a lesson, even in the ones that end horribly. There is always a lesson, and we can always trust that God has our back. Okay, that is the end of the chapter. And then on the bottom is some discussion questions. And I would encourage you guys to just read those on your own. They're kind of personal. But if you're experiencing a rival, then my prayers are with you. But remember what we talked about, letting God defend you. Letting him defend you is going to be the only way it's going to be resolved. honestly. If you try to fight back, or if you try to harden your heart and stop the pain, neither way is going to work out well. Turn to God, give it to Him, pray about it, and He will defend you, and it will all work out. I've shared before about the rivalry we experienced early in our marriage, and I don't have time to go into that whole detailed thing, and I don't know if I ever will, but basically how it all worked out is we just turned it over to God, and God just removed them. He removed them to a different area. We never really saw them again after that. So and it was like a miracle kind of thing. Like it was Him that did it. So it is possible. He is good. He has good things in store for you. So let's close this out in prayer. And then next week, we're going to be talking about your gender without rival. We are not at war with men. We are their helpmates. We are there to make them, better, and we're a team with them. We are not in comparison, and there is strongness in being a female. And so we're going to talk about our gender is without rival next week. So just go ahead and read the first few pages. I don't know when we're going to break it up, so just go ahead and read, I would say, at least half of that chapter. But let's close this out in prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this beautiful day. God, thank you so much for your goodness and your love. God, I just pray for anyone who is experiencing a rival, God, that you would just cause them to offer forgiveness and to just give it up to you, God, and that you would be their defender no matter what situation it is. God, we know how painful it is when it's someone we love, God. And I just pray that my friends are able to release that into your hands, God, and that you would move in those situations. God, I thank you for this study. I thank you that we can grow closer together and closer to you through it. Bless it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, you guys. So that is it. I've got the kids coming out in just a second. Thank you guys for spending this time with me. I am really, really excited about all the things that are coming in this study. If you know a friend who would benefit from this, make sure you share it with them. You can also give this video a big thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. As always, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a video, and click on that bell. That's also going to notify you when I post something new. And I'll see you guys all later. Bye.
Took some time, but we pointed out that tomorrow isn't here right now, baby. An absent mind came to roam around, captured you in a